Asma stood in front of the mirror. Her wedding dress was perfect. Her jewelry sparkled, and her family danced with joy. But her face stayed blank, her fists clenched tightly. Inside, she was furious. This wasn't what she wanted. Her father had forced her into this marriage. "Assad is a good man," he said. "He'll love you and take care of you." She had cried, begged. "I don't care if he's good. He's poor. I don't want to marry him." But her father didn't budge. "You're my daughter. I know what's best." Now, she was married to a man she didn't love. Assad stood beside her, calm and sincere. "Asma," he said gently, "I know this isn't what you wanted, but I promise I'll try my best to make you happy." She didn't answer. She looked away, because deep down she hated him, and she planned to show it every day. On the first night, Assad brought her to their home. It was small, but clean, simple, but ready. He had worked hard to prepare it for her, saved every rupee he could. But when Asma walked in, she laughed. This is where you brought me?" Assad paused. She looked around, unimpressed. "My father's guest room is bigger than this," he tried to explain. "I know it's not much, but I'll work hard. She cut him off. "Stop, just stop." Her voice was cold. "You don't deserve me. I only married you because I was forced." Assad's smile disappeared. She walked past him, head high. "I will never love you, Assad. Don't even try." And with that, she closed the door, leaving him out alone, quiet, holding on to a love that was already being crushed. He whispered to himself, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Because there was nothing else he could do. She reminded him every day that she hated him. Every word she said was filled with sarcasm, disgust, or silence. Whenever he tried to be kind, she pushed him away. Whenever he tried to bring her a gift, she mocked it. "Asma, I got you something," he said once, handing her a small box. Inside was a gold bracelet knot, the fanciest, but the best he could afford. She raised an eyebrow. "This? Are you serious?" He smiled, unsure. "I thought you'd like it," she scoffed. "You think I'm some beggar? Asma, I saved for 3 months for this." "3 months for this?" She laughed coldly. "You want me to wear this like I'm poor?" She tossed the box on the table and pulled out her card. "Get me an iPhone, the latest one." "Asma, we can't afford that." She stared at him. "Then work harder." He didn't argue. He never did. She made demand after demand. "I need a designer dress. I need a gold set for the party. I need a new car." And Assad? He gave her everything, even if it meant skipping meals, even if it meant bleeding from work, even if it meant losing himself, because he loved her. And no matter how she treated him, he kept trying. He reminded himself of the Prophet's words, "The best of you are those who are best to their wives." But it hurt. Every insult, every rejection, every time she reminded him she never wanted him. Even her friends laughed at him. "How do you live with that guy? He's so basic. No money, no style. You could have done better." Asma would smile and say proudly, "I didn't choose him. My father forced me." She never called him my husband. She never spoke of him with even a little respect. Asma treated Assad more like a servant than a husband. She never thanked him, never smiled at him, never even asked how he was doing. Every day was a new complaint. He could never do enough, never earn enough, never be enough. But still he tried. One day, Assad's closest friend pulled him aside. "Assad, this isn't a marriage. You're suffering." Assad looked tired. "She just needs time." His friend frowned. "No, she doesn't love you. She doesn't even respect you." Assad looked away. "She's destroying you, and you're letting her." But Assad's voice was soft. "If I leave her, who will take care of her?" His friend stared in disbelief. "She doesn't want your care. She just wants your money." Assad smiled gently. "That's okay. I didn't marry her to get love. I married her to give it." His friend stayed silent, because how do you argue with a man who loves this deeply? Assad worked harder than ever. Days turned into nights, nights into mornings. He barely slept. He barely ate. His hands became rough. His body grew thinner. His face paled from exhaustion. But every rupee he earned he gave to her. Not for himself, not for his needs, only for her wishes. She wanted something, he made it happen. She needed money, he found a way. And she never noticed. One night, his friend sat with him. "Assad, you look like you haven't eaten in days." "Assad, this is too much. You're killing yourself." His closest friend leaned closer. "She doesn't even care if you're alive." Assad lowered his gaze, quiet. And then he whispered, "But I love her." That broke the silence. No one knew what to say. His friend shook his head. "One day, you'll regret this." But Assad just smiled. Allah sees my patience, and that's enough." While he suffered in silence, Asma lived in comfort. She never saw the pain in his eyes, never noticed how tired he looked, never cared how much he sacrificed. All she saw was that her demands were met. One evening, she sat with her friends, sipping coffee. "I told Assad to get me another iPhone," she said. "He hesitated, but he'll do it. He always does." They laughed. "He's so weak, Asma. You control him like a remote," she smirked. "That's all he's good for." Those words came out without thought. She didn't know Allah was watching, because the man she called useless was the one carrying her entire world. While she slept peacefully under a fan, Assad was outside in the heat, loading sacks of coal. He walked 3 kilometers in burning sun to earn just 300 rupees. His shirt was soaked in sweat, his back hurt, his hands burned, but he didn't stop because he had promised her an expensive dress. And somehow he had to get it. No one helped him. No one noticed him. But Allah did, because Allah never forgets the silent suffering of his slaves. The next morning, Asma walked into the room and placed divorce papers on the table. "Assad, sign these." He looked up, stunned. "Asma, why?" "I don't want you. I never did. I'm tired of pretending." Her voice was cold. Assad's hands shook slightly. "If this is what you want, I won't stop you," she scoffed. "You couldn't stop me, even if you tried." Before signing, he looked at her and asked, "Just one thing. Was I ever enough for you?" She didn't even hesitate, not even close. His heart broke completely in that moment, but he still smiled softly. "Then may Allah give you someone better." She rolled her eyes. "I'll find someone better myself." And she walked away, never realizing she had just thrown away the only person who truly loved her. Asma left the papers on the table and walked away without a second glance. She thought she had finally won. No more Assad, no more simple life, no more pretending. She was free now, ready to start her new life. But Assad, he sat there for hours, just staring at the papers. He ran his fingers over the ink, over her name, the name of the woman he gave everything to, his money, his strength, his dreams. And now, she didn't want even his presence. He picked up the pen. His hands shook. His heart stayed silent. But he signed, not because he wanted to, but because she did. For the last time, he gave her what she asked for. That night, Assad stepped outside. The air was cold. His body was tired. Years of sleepless nights and heavy burdens had finally caught up to him. He whispered, "Ya Allah, was I not enough?" And then without warning, a car came speeding down the road. He didn't even see it coming. The impact threw him to the ground. His vision blurred. His body went numb. And just like that, Assad was gone. The news spread quickly. Assad died in an accident. Such a kind man. He didn't deserve this. Asma must be devastated. But she wasn't. At first, she felt nothing. No sadness. No guilt. She had been waiting for this moment. But then the silence hit her. No more Assad waking up early for her. No more Assad smiling despite her cruelty. No more Assad asking her what she needed. Suddenly, her world felt empty. And it scared her. But her pain had only just begun. That night, she saw him in her dream. She was standing under a blazing sun on a long, empty road. In the distance, she saw someone walking slowly, painfully. He carried a heavy sack on his back, sweat pouring down, hands trembling. She squinted. It was Assad. Her heart dropped. "Assad," she called out. He didn't respond. He just kept walking, step after step, dragging his feet. She ran toward him. "Assad, why are you carrying that?" He looked up, eyes full of pain. "I walked 3 kilometers every day carrying this coal, just to get 300 rupees, just to buy you what you wanted." Her knees gave way. She shook her head. "No, please stop." But he kept speaking. "I starved for you. I bled for you. I worked myself to death for you." Tears rolled down her face. "Assad, please." He looked at her, sorrow in his eyes. "But you never saw me, Asma." Then he vanished. She woke up screaming. For the first time, she cried for him, not for herself, not for her loneliness, but for the man who gave her everything and got nothing in return. "Assad, I'm sorry," she whispered, but it was too late, and Allah's justice had already begun. Her life slowly collapsed. The money she once bragged about meant nothing now. Her freedom felt like a cage. The laughter of her friends faded. Her father grew sick. Her friends drifted away. And her heart was the loneliest place in the world. Every night, she stared at the ceiling, whispering his name. "Assad, come back." But he never would. One evening, there was a knock on the door. She opened it, surprised to see Assad's closest friend, the one who had warned him. He looked at her for a moment, then handed her an envelope. "What is this?" she asked quietly. He didn't say much, just, "Read it." Inside was a small, crumpled note. It was Assad's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Asma, if I leave this world before you, please know, I never hated you. I never blamed you. I only ever wanted to love you, and I pray you find peace, even if it's not with me." The letter fell from her hands. She collapsed to the floor, and for the first time, she broke down. Not for what she lost, but for what she destroyed. She had crushed a man who never stopped praying for her, a man who gave without asking for anything in return, and now she could never make it right. This was her punishment. Not a fire, not pain, but regret. The kind that haunts you forever. Some people destroy the ones who love them the most. They insult soft hearts. They mock kind souls. They take true love for granted. But Allah sees everything. And do not oppress, for oppression will be darkness on the day of judgment. Assad's patience earned him Jannah. Asma's cruelty became her prison. Because sometimes the worst punishment is living with what you've done. And no wealth in the world can silence the pain of a heart you broke. So ask yourself, are you breaking a heart today that you'll cry for tomorrow? Subscribe for more stories in Ramadan.